The Marlins swept in Philadelphia. However, this is an emergency podcast. Sandy Alcantara will miss the entire 2024 season for the Marlins after he has Tommy John surgery immediately after the Marlins season ends. How will the Marlins handle this one? This is Locked on Marlins.
You are Locked on Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked on Marlins. This is your daily Marlins podcast. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up at Miami Marlins _UK on X or Twitter, whatever you call it these days. Thanks for making Locked on Marlins your first listen of the day. It's Saturday, the 7th of October, Saturday episode, guys. Emergency podcast territory. This is your team every day, of course. And there is a YouTube channel, guys. It is called Locked on Marlins. Head on over to there. Hit subscribe. Follow the action over there. There is no guest, just me on a solo pod on a Saturday morning here. The news broke. Sandy Alcantara has already had Tommy John surgery. He is out for the entirety of the 2024 season. Rough couple of days. Rough couple of days for Marlins fans, for Sandy Alcantara as well, obviously. But as Marlins fans, we exit the postseason, swept in Philadelphia, comprehensively as well. We'll talk about that in some more detail, probably on the next episode with Sean Barrett, looking back on that series and equally starting to look ahead to the offseason. However, spend the majority of time here talking about Sandy Alcantara and the news. Unsurprising, I feel like this was the likely outcome here after he tried his best to come back, try to make it back for the postseason, or even actually try to make it back for the end of the regular season. But Sandy gave it a go, pitched like a king actually in that rehab start. And then, unfortunately, as soon as you heard the news, he was still dealing with soreness in that situation. It felt like this was the most likely announcement that would then follow on. So the news, Sandy Alcantara has already had Tommy John surgery. He will miss the entirety of the 2024 season. The Marlins lose their ace for 2024. They have a few other guys clearly that have stepped up this year, but Sandy Alcantara, he's the leader of that rotation. And as well, what we did see, the impact, the ripple effect of no Sandy Alcantara rippled throughout the rotation. It isn't just a single day that Sandy impacts. It's at least 4, if not 5 days. His length was what allowed the Marlins to better manage some of the other guys and some of the younger guys and some of the arms that just haven't delivered these innings before. However, we need to take a step back here. I want to take a step back anyway. Sandy Alcantara, let's just look at from his career perspective where he's at in the numbers, from the numbers perspective right now. Sandy has thrown almost exactly 900 innings in his major league career. It's like 900 2/3. So that is a lot of work, 900 innings worth of work, without really any injury in any of that period. Like, this is his first real injury, other than COVID and a shaving incident a few years back. This is the first time that Sandy's actually been hurt. And this came right at the back end of a start where he went 8 innings against the Washington Nationals. I think from memory, he said one of the last curveballs he threw was when he felt it, specifically. So, I mean, that just kind of sums up Sandy, where he ends up injuring himself deep into a game, in a game probably that the Marlins needed to win because they needed to win all of them at the back end to make this postseason run. But injuring himself right at the back end, going 8 into a game, really digging into the repertoire, trying to get outs. And the curveball, I think, ended up being the pitch that ended up in this outcome. The other thing to call out, so Sandy, first time really facing any injury. The other thing to mention, 900 innings. The other thing to mention is that this, just on a bigger picture perspective, is just commonplace. Like, as much as you can point to anyone and say, you know, trying to manage it, trying to avoid Tommy John, like, it feels like in baseball, this is just an expected outcome now. It's like an expected TJ stat, expected Tommy Johns. You're expected to have one, at least. And that's just what we're seeing across the league right now. And the question has to be, do pitchers adjust? Or is this just expected, where you're going to have at least one season that you miss? And I wonder how that changes things just more generally in terms of how pitchers are managed, how they're remunerated. I don't know. There's tons of factors that kind of blend into this right now. Sandy's in an interesting spot, right, where he'd been extended by the Marlins. So financially, he knows exactly where he's at. For other guys, it may have been less certain. It is less certain. And, I think that's kind of one of the main things just in the game right now is just these 162 seasons. We kind of saw as the year just progressed through, like so many teams just dealing with like pitching injuries. Like it's just crazy the amount of injuries we see across the league, and you just never know when it's going to happen. And as much as you can kind of manage guys like the Marlins were trying to manage Eury Perez, and granted, right, Sandy has had as much tread on the tires as any pitcher in the last 3 seasons. He's thrown 600 innings in 3 years. It's the most tread on any tires. So logically, you would assume that Sandy at some point is going to break down. But we just never saw it coming. There was no leading indicator. Maybe you could look at this year's performance and say something looked kind of off all year long. So was he dealing with something all year long? I don't know. I don't think so. And maybe the fact that Sandy was struggling, I'm going off on a tangent here, but I'm just kind of thinking out loud, really. Maybe the fact that Sandy was kind of struggling with his game a touch, he ended up trying to do things that he hasn't done before. And has that led to this outcome? A pitcher's trying to readjust. Is Sandy trying to readjust and find ways, always looking to find ways, new ways maybe, to get outs? And does that put extra strain on the body, on the arm? I don't know. Or is this just a freak situation? Is this just the expected situation for pitchers? That because of the motion, which when you slow it down like super slow-mo, you look at it and you think, man, that doesn't look healthy. Like when you just see the way the muscles and the arm and everything going on in like super slow-mo, you can absolutely understand why these guys are dealing with these arm issues and shoulder issues, etc. It's just a really unnatural motion to get that, 100-mile-an-hour gasolina. So, huge blow. Huge blow for the Marlins, clearly. They lose their ace, and they lose them not just for the back end of 23, which was painful enough, albeit the Marlins ended up reaching their goals, exceeding their goals, making it to the postseason. They also made it into the wild card, so great. They got swept in the 3-game series on the road in Philadelphia. There's no shame in that. Absolutely none. I'm going to dig into that in more depth. Would Sandy Alcantara have impacted that series? Maybe. But overall, you've got to look at that series and think, even if Sandy was there, the Marlins offense only put up 2 runs in 2 games. And so it's, game situational games, however you want to think about it. Like, if it's kept closer to the Marlins, does the Marlins offense react? Do things go differently? I don't know. Fundamentally, Zach Wheeler was unbelievable in that game 1. I'm not sure anyone was beating Zach Wheeler in that game, even if it was Sandy. So, Sandy, he gave everything for 23. He tried his best to get back to help the guys. And that's what we're going to talk about after the ad as well, just like the mentality of Sandy. We also want to look at what this means for the 2024 rotation. Without the ace, who's going to need to step up? How does this also impact the offseason? Both in terms of free agent targets, also, how does it impact it from a trade perspective, where maybe they're looking to add pieces in? So, tons to get into here. But this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at iBotta. Yes, sir. The Ibotta guys. So Ibotta, they give you cash back on hundreds of grocery items from produce to personal care to pantry goods. I mean, maybe party goods too. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop and get your cash back. It's that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $100 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, or you could use the cash back to buy that flight you've been eyeing, that game you're dying to go to, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers. So when you start with Ibotta, it includes Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Download the Ibotta app now and use the code MLB to start earning real cash back. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use this code. The code is MLB. And Ibotta is spelled IBOTTA. Ibotta in the Google Play or App Store. And use that code MLB. All right, guys. Back here with me, Peter Pratt, on Saturday, the 7th of October, reacting to the news that Sandy Alcantara has had Tommy John surgery and will miss the entire 2024 season for the Miami Marlins. The 5th seed in the NL, Miami Marlins. Just wanted to add that, sprinkle that in. So, Sandy Alcantara, we just need to talk about him, his mentality, and his willingness to sacrifice himself. Just wanted to call that out. Sandy knew there was a problem after this Washington series, in September. He knew there was a problem. He, the x-ray showed UCL sprain, however you want to phrase it. Effectively, he knew that there was an issue with the UCL, which would mean that high probability wise, if he kept doing anything, it was Tommy John. Frankly, I think he already knew it was Tommy John irrespective. Sandy Alcantara put his body on the line for his team. He tried his best to make it back. He was throwing pretty quickly. They were closely monitoring him. He then had a rehab start, which kind of came out of the blue. And he was sensational in the rehab start. Everyone was thinking, hey, here we go. Sandy's going to be back. Felt good, looked good, everything's good. You're thinking, man, here we go. Sandy's back. The Marlins have dodged a bullet here. Sandy's dodged a bullet. Maybe this can be managed. In reality, no. The damage was already done. And there was, unfortunately, the inevitable was staring Sandy, the Marlins, and the fans in the face. We have to tip our cap to Sandy Alcantara, though. Just his mentality, the doggedness, the desire to get back and help his team. We saw as soon as they clinched how much it meant to Sandy Alcantara. He's effectively spent all of his career here in Miami. And also the other thing is just to talk about the contract situation. Because, we don't often look back at contracts and, the extension happened a while ago now. Sandy will obviously miss 2024. That would have been his 3rd arbitration year. He's owed $9 million in that year, but we won't see anything from Sandy in that year. He then has 2 more guaranteed years at $17 million a year. There's then a club option in 2027 in his age 31 season. Club option of $21 million. So Sandy, all being well, when he's back in 2025, the Marlins have Sandy locked up, under control for at least 3 more seasons. So, Sandy's going to spend a good amount of time with the Marlins. He's committed to them. They've committed to each other. And like I said, you could see just how much it meant to Sandy, how much it meant to him when they made the postseason. He knew he couldn't impact it. He knew he was going to miss 2024 by that point. It was pretty much the worst kept secret, right? I think if you read Twitter and you look on Twitter, I think we all knew where things were trending. I think maybe Sean Barrett called it out as well on this pod that's the likely outcome here, and Sandy knew it. But Sandy, he wanted to give his all and sacrifice himself in many ways to try his best to get this team where they wanted to be and where he wanted them to be. So Sandy is always a true leader, an absolute stud, no doubt about it. Unfortunately, we will not see him in 2024. That then takes us to the question of who will we see in 2024? And how does this impact the rotation at this point. So here's what we know. We know Jesus Luzardo will be back, and effectively he becomes your proxy ace. Proxy, is that the right use of that word in that sentence? I'm not sure. Anyway, Jesus Luzardo becomes the ace in 2024. Career year for him in 23. Dogged final outing, obviously, against the Phils. You then have Braxton Garrett, another lefty. Brax, career year, career innings. Pitched well, I must say, as well in Philly. Was on the quick hook on that one, by the way. It was interesting that he got relatively quick hooked on that. Again, that kind of shows the disparity, the variance between what Sandy can do, what Zach Wheeler could do in that game, in game one, versus Braxton Garrett, where you then have to start managing guys 4 innings in, 5 innings in, then it's into the bullpen. So again, it's all about the ripple effect. Sandy's impact is felt, 4 out of every 5 days, probably at least, just because of the length he delivers that no one else can do, pretty much. Anyway, back to the rotation. So you have those 2 guys, the guys that started the postseason games. You then have Edward Cabrera that ended up back into the rotation in 2023. You then have returning guys such as Max Meyer, who had Tommy John in 2022, thus missing the whole of 2023. You then have maybe Trevor Rogers looking to return. I think he, will be. He'll be pushing for that, but clearly, A, he needs to be healthy, and B, he needs to return to the form that he showed as well. We haven't quite seen Trevor Rogers for a good couple of years now, and so there's a lot of risk in that. There's a lot of risk in Edward Cabrera with his volatility, I guess. You then look around and think, okay, you've got Ryan Weathers, and I think Ryan Weathers is a really intriguing one and actually becomes super critical for the Marlins now, heading into 24. We saw Weathers. He pitched the last game. Granted, it was game 162. It was officially game 162 because 161 ended up, or the return to the Mets didn't end up happening and the Marlins lost that game. So it was 162. Weathers pitched well in that game. He did his job. The Pirates equally were, resting a lot of guys. It wasn't the full strength Pirates. But Weathers absolutely needs to take a step forward, and follow the same storyline as Jesus Luzardo. That's what the Marlins are going to be desperate for now. They're going to need that because, again, this Sandy news ripples through. You've got so much variance, so much risk in all these guys all of a sudden. What can Weathers be? Can Trevor return? Can Eddie show some consistency? The Marlins do have a club option on Johnny Cueto. I think it's fair to say, considering he was left off the postseason roster, even with this news, I think the production out of Johnny Cueto, clearly they're not going to be picking up that option. So Johnny Cueto won't be around either. So really, what that makes you feel is man, this is thin. It's thin when you lose Sandy. The Marlins have got some work to do in the offseason. They really have. They had some work to do, I think, at the deadline and couldn't get some deals done. They're going to have some work to do in the offseason. They probably at this point need to add, 2 innings eating veterans in some sort of way. And there's going to be a few of them around. There was a lot of kind of rental arms moving around. The Marlins will be able to piece it together. It's just which direction they go on that. And the other impact here, in my opinion, is just more generally how it impacts the offseason. Been talking about it on Twitter for the last couple of days. Clearly, the main hole that the Marlins, I think, have to fill is the shortstop position. There's a lot of internal candidates for that. And, you could look at many of them. I mean, the Marlins effectively had 7 shortstops in AAA last year. The frustrating element around that thus far has been that none of them really took that step. You were maybe looking at Jacob Amaya. I think that was probably the primary one where you knew the glove was sexy. It was Miggy Rowe 2.0 was how it was coined. But Jacob Amaya offensively really didn't take a step forward, particularly after he kind of came up, had his brief spell with the Marlins, went back down, and then had a turgid rest of the year. So, with the Marlins thinking about making, carrying on this momentum from 23 and not taking a step back, I think they were likely looking to make a big splash at shortstop. A similar one to the one they made at third base with Jake Berger. I think they were looking to do something similar at shortstop, swinging a trade that maybe you wouldn't anticipate for a relatively highly controllable player. How they would piece it together using the prospect capital available, who knows? That's up for debate also. But I think that's the direction they were thinking about going. However, to make that happen, you would then also maybe look around and think, okay, would someone see significant value in an Edward Cabrera or a Max Meyer? But right now, based on what we've seen, you then have to ask the question, is this Sandy Alcantara injury going to impact those decisions? Can the Marlins really afford to trade away Max Meyer or Edward Cabrera at this point? I don't know. To be honest with you, I felt like both of them were probably expendable for the right trade. Like we saw with Jake Eder. Everyone was liking Jake Eder a lot. But for the right move, for an MLB level talent, a all-star level talent maybe in some ways, you make the deal. That deal does look like it's panned out great. So I was expecting maybe something similar, but this Sandy news really does put the cat amongst the pigeons, to be honest with you. So Kim Ang is going to have a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do this offseason. There's some volume plays to make, but equally there's some key target situations. The other thing we should think about as well is how does Jazz Chisholm Jr. fit into all of this? I'm going to talk about that shortly. Before we do that, let you know about our good friends over at FanDuel. Yes, sir. So you can step into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Reminder on that one, that's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose, when you place that $5 bet. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, guys, you're back here with myself, Peter Pratt, on Saturday, the 7th of October, reacting to the news, the breaking news, kind of. It was last night, but, this is a morning pod. That Sandy Alcantara, Tommy John surgery immediately after the season ends and will miss the entirety of the 2024 season. Huge blow for the Fish. Huge blow for Kim Ang. Huge blow for Skip Schumacher, for Sandy, for Mel, for the fan base, for the players, everyone. Sandy gave it all. He gave his all. He got the team there to the postseason. Huge effort from Sandy, from the guys. They made it. However, this injury impacts the rotation significantly for 2024. Luzardo and Brax and Yuri Perez. I didn't even mention Yuri Perez. Why did I mention Yuri Perez? Those three guys, reliable in some sense, but all needing management. Yuri Perez, Braxton Garrett, Eddie Cabrera, all these guys, really super young guys that need managing. And that's the wrinkle effect. The wrinkle effect of Sandy Alcantara. Skip Schumacher at times through 2023 was kamikaze with his bullpen management because he had to be. He knew that this was going to be a close thing. If the Marlins were to make the postseason, Skip had to be kamikaze at times with his bullpen decisioning, trotting guys back out there because they were hot, keeping games close, waiting for the offense to come alive in the 7th, 8th, and 9th. Kamikaze worked from Skip, and it worked. It worked. He got him there. But Sandy Alcantara underpins that, and they lose that now. They lose that. There's no one else like him. So there's going to have to be a change of philosophy, maybe a change of roster construction, bullpen management. So many impacts here. But if everything is, if all is equal, the Marlins know they've got a top three they can rely on in Brax, Yuri, and Jesus Luzardo. They have some upside guys with questions in Trevor Rogers, in Ryan Weathers, in Max Meyer. No, not Sixto. They have some upside there that they hope can step up. Johnny Cueto won't be back with the club, in my opinion. So the Marlins and Kim will have some work to do in the offseason in terms of free agents. I think there's tons of free agents. And all of a sudden now, there's a lot of buzz around Trevor Bower. Naturally, because of the story that came out that Trevor released around the main allegation, I think that was the one that everyone really hyper-focused on. There were a few other allegations, and I'm not completely certain on where everything's up to, but it feels like that one situation with Bower was a bit of a hit job. And so everyone's feeling a little bit different about Trevor Bower now and feeling maybe a bit more sympathy towards him. All of a sudden, a lot of people going, well, should we bring Trevor Bower back? Do the Marlins want to go down that path? I don't know. I spoke about it last year, actually. Should the Marlins consider it? I don't know. What I would say is the hallmark of the 2023 Marlins was the clubhouse. So that's the first question, irrespective of what Trevor Bower can deliver to you on the field. And I don't want to really dig into Trevor Bower hugely. I haven't really prepared for that at this point. But the first question Skip and Kim will be asking is, if we are interested and we want to go down this path, is he going to fit? How does everyone else feel about this? Does anyone know him? Has anyone worked with him before? What kind of impact is he going to have to the clubhouse vibes? Because when you look at Sandy Alcantara and Trevor Bower, they seem very different personality-wise. But is Trevor Bower just misunderstood? Is it been a hit job from the media on Trevor Bower? I actually don't know. I don't know that. I actually haven't really formed a huge opinion on Trevor Bower. What I would say is, and this is the thing when it goes back to the pandemic specifically, it was the first time I really started to listen to Trevor Bower in any kind of capacity. He was talking about the commercial operation and the impact of that on Major League Baseball, the teams, the players, and their remuneration. The guy is extremely switched on. He is extremely intelligent. He knows his stuff. And I don't know if maybe that's why the hit job happened on him. I don't know. I actually don't know. But he's an intelligent guy. But the decision around that will stem from, will he blend into this clubhouse? Because we saw it this year. I was with Tobin and Leroy on their show earlier this week, reacting to the Marlins exit in the postseason. What I did say on that was, this is something that I was thinking back and reflecting on. It's been so interesting this year with the Marlins, right? Where they've been in it all year. Things have gone well. They've made the postseason. They've exceeded their expectations. Great. The one thing I want to look back is there's been no drama. Seemingly no public drama anyway that I could think of. There's been no Starling Marte rat rockets. None of that. There's been no Monte Harrison bust-ups with Starling Marte. Well, Starling Marte was in the middle of all this. Anyway, there's been none of that. There's been no players' meetings that have got out of hand, and you've ended up with, like, guys going at each other in a way that maybe wasn't, super effective, let's say. None of that. So this season was dramaless in many ways, and that's the way it should be. Maybe the drama was kept in-house. I don't know. But that, for me, just shows how well Skip Schumacher has done with this clubhouse, with this team. And how really, if you keep things in an even keel and the clubhouse ticking along nicely, how much of an impact that can have. We've seen it, and we've heard it, the rumors and the rumblings around the San Diego Padres. The way that clubhouse has gone sideways. And all of a sudden, no performance. So I know I've gone off on a tangent here, which I didn't expect to. And it's a long offseason, so we'll carry on this conversation, I guess. But the Marlins are going to need some free agent arms. One of them could be Trevor Bower. The question before they even entertain any financial remuneration situation is the player and that personality going to fit into the clubhouse? If you have your doubts, then pass. And actually, this isn't about Trevor Bower only. This is about any player. Kim Ang getting the right people in is critical, is absolutely critical. This is going to be a huge offseason for Kim. I do think this injury impacts the way that she's going to approach things. Because I think probably one of Trevor Rogers, Eddie Cabrera, or Max Meyer would have been moved in a headline deal to go and get a shortstop, in my opinion. Does she have to reevaluate now? Maybe. We're going to carry on that conversation real soon. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day, guys. Unfortunately, I have to bring you the news that Sandy Alcantara has already had Tommy John surgery and will miss the 2024 season. It's a huge blow for the Marlins and the fans, and for Sandy. Equally, we tip our caps to Sandy. 900 innings in his career thus far. 600 innings in 3 seasons for the Marlins, including a Cy Young campaign. Even when he knew that this was likely leading to Tommy John, he still gutted it out, tried everything to get back on the field. A true warrior, a true leader, a true ace, an absolute stud. And we can't wait to see Sandy back in 2024. See you soon, guys.